Let's move on now. I've got some thoughts on this open segment here. And if you guys don't mind, I want to start out here because I just thought this was the most hilarious, ironic quote that I've seen in our sport in a really long time. As you all know, obviously there's a lawsuit and a counter lawsuit now going on between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports as well over the charter agreement. And we got a quote this week, and I want to make sure I get this title right here. This is an article from the Associated Press. If I remember after Michelle, I'll put a link in the description or a pinned comment or whatever. This is NASCAR attorney Christopher Yates, and I'll start quoting the article verbatim here, went so far as to tell the Associated Press that Curtis Polk, who in addition to being Michael Jordan's business manager, is a co-owner of 2311, along with three-time Daytona 500 winner Denny Hamlin, does not understand the NASCAR business model. And it goes on, and there's this quote that says, "I don't think Mr. Polk really understands the sport," Yates told the AP. "I think he came into it, and his view is that it should be much more like the NBA or other league sports. But it's not. No motorsport is like that. He's done a lot of things that might work in the NBA or might be okay in the NBA, but are just not appropriate in NASCAR." And of course, I couldn't help but think back to the last 21, 22 years of NASCAR history and certain things that have been introduced into our sport. We decided that when Matt Kenseth clinched the championship by simply taking the green flag at Homestead, despite winning only one race in 2003, that we wanted to spice things up a little bit in the postseason, so to speak, for NASCAR. And so we instituted the chase for the NASCAR Nextel Cup, which has since been renamed the playoffs. We just got done talking about how fans don't like when races end under caution, so we're going to extend the race to give fans a green, white, checkered finish, which we have since renamed overtime. We have also, in recent years, instituted stage racing that resembles periods or quarters or dividing the race up into segments. If you want an extreme example of that, we add a fourth stage at the Coca-Cola 600 and literally divide the race up into quarters. And what's coming later this year when Prime and Turner take over the inaugural in-season tournament? Gee, I wonder where they got that idea from. What do all these things have in common, ladies and gentlemen? These are things that the NBA does that, in my view, don't really belong in motorsport, but NASCAR has decided to institute them over the last couple of decades nonetheless.
Checks out.
If you want to die on the hill that you like a guaranteed Game 7 moment, you like what the playoff system provides, that's fine. I very strongly disagree, but I will acknowledge your right to have that opinion. I will acknowledge your right to have the opinion that you want a green flag finish at whatever cost necessary. I will acknowledge your right to have the opinion that you think these races get too strung out. I personally will never understand the desire for less green flag racing. I think our stage cautions in particular are far too long when there's no incident on the racetrack that requires a caution flag. I liked what we experimented with in 2023. I would take that in a heartbeat over throwing the stage cautions. But if that's your cup of tea, that's fine. And listen, people saying the in-season tournament's the straw that broke the camel's back. The straw that broke the camel's back for me happened years ago. So at this point, have your goofy little $1 million in-season tournament. I don't really care. But you cannot tell me with a straight face, as these very serious legal matters are going on, that Mr. Polk wants the sport to be like the NBA, but we're not interested in being like the NBA, when almost every major decision you've made that has impacted your sport in the last 22 years has been a move that resembles what stick and ball sports leagues like the NBA do, that almost no other serious motorsports series worldwide has brought into their sport. So I look at this and I say to myself, and this is coming off of people going through the legal documents. Apparently NASCAR cited an Essentially Sports article in reference 30. I think, was that Matt Weaver, I think, that tweeted that. I just don't know how we're supposed to take NASCAR's side of this lawsuit seriously when that comes out and when a quote like this comes out, when all the evidence suggests that you have been trying to emulate the NBA. And I think the in-season tournament, you're calling it the in-season tournament. I mean, I guess the only way you could make it more obvious is if you do what the NBA did, renaming it the NBA Cup for their second season of this. If you rename it the NASCAR Cup at the last minute, which I guess you can't do because that's the name of your top series anyway. But, I mean, come on. It's so obvious where you got this idea for the in-season tournament, isn't it? It's just ridiculous to me.
Could call it the NAS Cup. I don't know.
You could. I don't know. I'll give the floor to you guys though now. I don't know if Brandon, Tanner, do you have any thoughts on what's the latest development in this ongoing saga between NASCAR and 2311?
No, as far as using the essentially sports article in the lawsuit, I guess I mean that at that level we might as well just start referencing Sportskeeda as well. What are they called? You know,
Yep.
based in India. Like, go ahead. That's fair game.
Yeah, pretty much. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. I'm going to be honest. Everything that I have seen come out of the NASCAR camp from the two different lawsuits that now we have to keep track of. And poor Bob Pockris, he's got a living document going up on Fox Sports' website that he updates every time that there's anything newsworthy that happens with this lawsuit or a couple of lawsuits. So now he's got to keep track of two different things, and that's going to be so messy for him. And I do not envy him in that regard. But
it's a thankless job. Thank him if you can.
Yeah, I every time that I write about the lawsuit, I make sure to include his document and cite him in it. So I'm like, please just go read this. I'm not going to be able to give you a succinct enough summary of it, but everything that NASCAR has done throughout this lawsuit and this newest lawsuit is just so reeking of desperation. And to keep calling the 2311, basically the four pillars of the RTA, a cartel, and continuing to double down on that term through the first lawsuit and now this counter filing is just so Bush League and unprofessional. Like imagine this for a second. 5 years ago, saying that Jeff Gordon, Fox Sports presenter and partial team owner of Hendrick Motorsports and one of the greatest that's ever raced in the sport, is a member of an illegal cartel. Like, imagine saying that to somebody 5 years ago and seeing what their reaction would be. It would be hysterical. They'd just be crying on the floor. So, yeah, it's definitely pretty rich for NASCAR to be like, but no, you're the one doing antitrust. You're the one doing antitrust, actually, by organizing with the team owners like you've done even before 2311 even got here. Because the RTA was established, I believe, in 2016 when the charters were originally brought about by Rob Kaufman and MWR, basically for them to get a paycheck on their way out.
Yeah. I think it might have been established a year before, and then the charters.
You're
charters
right.
for 2016, but I think there were the momentum was building towards that as early as 2015, even. But
which is before anything about Michael Jordan being involved in NASCAR ever even came up as anything more than a joke. So yeah, I wrote an article on Pitbox Press this past week, which I urge anybody to check out that's interested in a thought experiment. But I basically put pen to paper saying that we need to start thinking about what this could mean for the sport if they are to lose the antitrust lawsuit. And essentially, I just go through the organizational stuff that would happen should NASCAR lose this lawsuit and any subsequent appeal of it. And, you know, it's a pretty interesting thought experiment. I'm sure it's going to be completely wrong in the event that 2311 and Front Row actually do win this lawsuit. But overall, my thoughts on these comments are just, they're so rich, so rich for all of the reasons Ben has already laid out for all of you. And it's pretty telling when a extremely conservative Supreme Court practically laughs you out of the courtroom in the case of the NCAA NIL suits that came up during COVID, which ultimately went the way of Jeffrey Kessler and the athletes. They were granted a unanimous 9-0 decision over the NCAA to grant athletes the ability to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. And me personally, I thought it was pretty bad that happened, that you get laughed out of the courtroom in that way. But I kind of am seeing through these different motions and court filings from Chris Yates and his broader firm that he works for, that I see the makings of why that happened without looking too far into it. So, yeah, I'm just really ready for this all to be done with. Personally, I would like to keep our talk to the racetrack and nothing more, but yeah, NASCAR keeps making just the greatest quotables that you could come up with going into this lawsuit, and Jeffrey Kessler just keeps smoking them in the courtroom, and I expect that to continue throughout the rest of discovery that's going to happen throughout the summer here, and inevitably when we get to the courtroom for real in December, assuming no settlement happens before then.
Yeah, I've just been updating my NASCAR quote book pretty much monthly, I think, ever since the 8 out of 10 fans and we like what we're seeing quotes dropped in whatever that was, 2018, 2019. And it's just been on from there. But I will fully admit, I am no legal expert. I'll defer that to people like Tanner, who have been following the lawsuit a little bit more closely. I'll defer that to my editor-in-chief over at lastcard.info, Brock Beard, who actually did go to law school and took the bar exam a few times. I will fully admit my ignorance when it comes to, how a lot of these legal proceedings work. But I do know, I'd like to think I have a pretty good idea of how NASCAR works and how the NBA works. Basketball is probably the number one stick and ball sport that I follow. Although I don't know, soccer's getting up there. I must admit, I've become a pretty big fan of that over the last couple of years. But I know a lot about how the NBA works too. And looking at the decisions that NASCAR has made over the last 2 decades, again, I think the fact that league was singled out in particular in a year where NASCAR is doing this in-season tournament, you can't help but look at these quotes and really struggle to take them seriously in the grander context of everything that's going on here. So again, Tanner, I'm with you. I hope that these issues get resolved sooner rather than later, because I think part of the reason that I haven't been following it as closely is because I'm with you. I want to be talking about what's happening on the racetrack as opposed to what's happening away from the racetrack here. But it is going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds here in the coming months.